So, it all started at 3 in the morning. I was sitting there, scrolling through some forum I won't name, and I came across a listing. Just text, no picture. Deep sea anomaly, live specimen, 2 species, limited batch. The price was so absurd that I figured either it's a prank or someone's selling fancy axolotls with a markup. I placed the order. Why? Because content. Because I'm an idiot. Both reasons are equally valid. The package arrived 9 days later. 2 matte gray metal containers, no labels anywhere, both covered in condensation. Those thin, icy droplets, like they'd just been pulled out of a freezer. One barely vibrated under my fingers. The second was completely still and silent. And for some reason, the silent one scared me more. I put on black latex gloves and started opening. The first container opened with a hiss of cold air. Inside, clear gel and something white inside it. I lifted it out with both hands, palm-sized, chubby, rounded, white-gray, like someone sculpted a fish out of clouds and forgot to add bone. The body was soft. I pressed a finger gently, and it gave way like fresh bread. On a disproportionately large head sat a square mouth, enormous, just enormous, slightly open with small, rounded teeth all around the edge. Eyes, 2 tiny black dots, almost invisible. It looked at me with the expression of someone who just woke up and has no idea where they are or what is happening. I named him Bloop immediately, without thinking, because he just looks exactly like a bloop. The second container I opened more slowly. Inside, dark, nearly black gel. And in the corner, a creature. Elongated, dark violet, almost black, covered in scales with hairline cracks running along every plate. Like dried out earth in a heat wave. It didn't move. I brought a flashlight closer, and that's when I saw it. Inside its mouth, a spiral was slowly rotating, red and glowing, like white-hot metal, like a vortex disappearing into nothing. When I leaned the flashlight in closer, the temperature in the room seemed to drop slightly. I quickly closed the container. This one I named Void, because that's exactly what it is. I set up their enclosures. For Bloop, a large tank, 150 liters of cold salt water, a little slide made from PVC pipe, and a hammock cut from nylon mesh. Bloop swam in, immediately found the hammock, and just hung there sideways, like a sock on a clothesline. When I tossed in a frozen fish, he didn't dart toward it. He slowly rotated his whole body so his mouth was pointed at the food and just drifted forward, like a vacuum cleaner. The fish was gone in a second. Bloop went back to the hammock. For Void, a dark terrarium with infrared lighting, a few rocks and hides. I dropped in 3 live feeder fish. Void didn't move, just watched them with those red eyes. The fish swam around. I watched. About 20 seconds passed, then I blinked, and the fish were gone. Void was sitting in exactly the same spot. I still have no idea how he did it. I got a leafcutter ant colony for each of them, for habitat maintenance. The ants took to Bloop immediately. Within 2 days, they had mapped out routes, started hauling food right up to his face, cleaning up leftovers. Bloop just lay there. One ant climbed directly onto his head. Bloop didn't move a muscle. The ants took hours just to approach Void's enclosure. They stood at the boundary, antenna twitching. Eventually, they moved in, along the very edge, keeping as much distance from him as possible. Void watched. The ants began moving around him in a perfectly even circle, as if they somehow knew there was an invisible boundary that was better left uncrossed. Month 1. Bloop doubled in size. Eats everything. Fish, squid. One time he tried a rubber bath duck, held it in his mouth for 10 seconds, and spat it out with the look of someone deeply insulted. Sleeps 18 hours a day. The ants walk all over him. He doesn't react. Void barely changed in appearance, but one morning I came in and found the terrarium lid slightly shifted. The latch had been opened from the inside. Void was sitting on the edge, methodically studying the room. I put a padlock on it. The following week, he opened the padlock too. I bought a combination lock. Month 2, I made a mistake. I put them together to see how they'd react. Bloop immediately aimed his mouth at Void and drifted toward him. Because for Bloop, anything that moves is potentially food. Void sidestepped so fast I barely caught the movement, then spun around and fired a red flash straight at Bloop. A dense, hot pulse, like a camera flash, but red and scorching. Bloop flew backwards, hit the wall, and sat there trembling with an expression of total incomprehension. I separated them into different rooms immediately. Month 3 nearly gave me a heart attack. That morning the tank was empty. Not under the bed, not in the bathroom. I searched the whole house. Found him in the kitchen cabinet. Bloop was sitting in there, perfectly round, like a ball, surrounded by empty pasta bags, crushed cans, and torn cookie boxes. He was looking up at me with those little dot eyes, looking absolutely content. I said, "You ate all my pasta." He opened his mouth. Getting him out of the cabinet took 3 minutes. He was literally stuck because he'd rounded out too much. By month 5, it was obvious. Everything was spinning out of control. Bloop filled the entire tank, water spilling over the edge with every single movement he made. Void had started doing something to the space around him. When I stood near his terrarium for longer than 5 minutes, a headache would begin, deep and dull, like pressure. Void's ant colony had completely changed. They stopped moving chaotically and began moving in perfect synchrony, turning at the same moment, stopping at the same moment, like one organism with 300 legs. Watching it made my skin crawl. I hired a crane. Under the baffled stares of neighbors watching from their balconies, the construction arm lowered into my window, and Bloop was ceremoniously carried in a canvas sling to the big backyard pool. He dropped into the water and began slowly swimming in circles with the air of a king who has finally been given fitting chambers. Void was moved into a large industrial steel container in the yard. That same night, something happened inside it. By morning, the container walls had melted from the inside, steel, like candle wax. Void was sitting on the grass outside, calm, watching, waiting for me to understand. I understood. There was no containing them anymore. The ocean. I called a tanker truck and a harbor crane, and at dawn, when the sky was pink gray and the port hadn't woken up yet, we drove them to the water. On the pier, I went up to Bloop one last time. He was already the size of a car, warm, chubby, white, like an enormous living pillow. He reached toward my hand and gave it a gentle suction, the Bloop way. I barely held it together between laughing and something that felt dangerously close to crime. To Void, I said, "Take care of yourself." He lowered his head for just a second, barely perceptible, like a nod. They were lowered into the water. The dark water closed over them. Silence. I said to the camera, "The experiment is over." Naive. 3 months later, the news started running strange reports. Anomalous, ultra-low frequency acoustic signals in the Pacific. So low that standard equipment could barely detect them. Fishing vessels reported total disappearance of fish across entire regions, as if the ocean in certain areas had simply been emptied. Satellite images captured large, dark, moving shapes beneath the surface. Enormous, several kilometers across. I watched these reports and felt something tighten inside my chest. 6 months later, Void came to the coast. A dark violet body the length of an aircraft carrier moving along the shoreline, and the red spiral inside his mouth visible from miles away. A massive, pulsing vortex that pulled in water, fish, and vessels in a continuous stream. Everything in his path didn't get destroyed. It disappeared. The military tried to stop him. Ships, jets, missiles. The missiles went into the vortex and disappeared too. Infrasonic waves rolling off his body washed over coastal cities, and people ran out into the streets gripped by panic they couldn't explain. Void wasn't evil. He simply existed and moved, and that alone was the catastrophe. He was heading toward a major port city, directly, without deviation. A dark violet mountain, an enormous spiral of red light, and a low, continuous hum that made windows vibrate 50 kilometers away. And at that moment, something white rose from the water. At first, it looked like an iceberg, then like an island. Then it opened its eyes. 2 tiny black dots, exactly the same ones that had stared up at me from a kitchen cabinet surrounded by torn pasta bags. Bloop, enormous, nearly spherical. He rose from the water like a white moon, and his square mouth slowly opened. Void attacked. The red spiral spun up to full force, and the blast wave hit everything around. Cars on the seafront flipped over. Bloop didn't dodge. Bloop opened his mouth and absorbed it, swallowed the strike whole, the same way he'd always swallowed fish, rubber ducks, and my pasta, then absorbed the next one. The ocean between them churned with 2 opposing vortexes, one red, one white, pulling in opposite direction. Void roared with infrasound. Bloop said nothing and just kept eating everything that came his way. Nobody won, but Bloop kept moving forward, slowly, inevitably, the same way he always moved toward food, and Void began to retreat, meter by meter, kilometer by kilometer. Deeper, further from the shore, toward the place where the ocean is dark and cold and has no end. Together they went under. The red light was the last thing to go. The sea settled. On the horizon, the sky was orange and perfectly quiet. I'm standing on the same pier. The water is dark, calm, impenetrable. I don't know if they're alive. I don't know what's happening down there where there's no light and no people. But I know one thing. They were together from the very beginning. From that first night when I put 2 containers on a table and pulled on a pair of black gloves. Maybe that's exactly why it ended the way it did, one holding the other, somewhere down there. I pull out my phone, open the same forum, see a new message. New batch, 2 eggs, completely different species, delivery available. I look at the screen, then I look at you. Like this video if you think I shouldn't do it.